Oh, I start? Uh, okay. What are phonotactic constraints? Definition: phonotactic constraints are rules and restrictions concerning the ways in which syllables can be created in a language. They define what sound sequences are possible and what other sound sequences are possible in a given language. These constraints are based on an examination of what sequences occur and what sequences do not occur in that language. In English, there are constraints in terms of length, what sequences are possible, and where in the syllable they can occur. The term phonotactics constraints was coined by Robert Stockwell in 1954 when he used it for the first time at an unpublished Georgetown Roundtable meeting to explain constraints on permissible consonant clusters. Okay. And then English study on phonotactic constraints, according to the US National Library of Medicine, an experimental study was conducted in 2011 and published by 2012 by researchers to understand the use of phonotactic constraints on infants. They found 70, 17 to 20-month-old infants to participate, and an additional 22 infants were excluded from the analysis because of complications. And then the infants were randomly assigned to either the legal labels condition or the illegal labels condition. The infants were shown pictures of two novel objects and familiar objects, a ball and a shoe. The familiar items were included during label teaching and test trials to add variety to the task and to provide infants with a familiar context for the labeling. During teaching trials, a single object moved from left to right in a small area on the left or right side of the screen while the object was labeled. Infants in the legal labels condition heard two phonotactically legal labels for the two novel objects. Infants in the illegal labels condition heard two phonotactically illegal labels for the objects. They were designed to be phonetic matches. In the legal labels condition, Dreifan Flube. In the illegal labels condition, Delafe and Shrube. And then to examine novel object label recognition, they performed a 2x2 mixed design ANOVA of corrected fixation proportion. There were no main effect of label indicating that infants did not perform directly on the two novel object labels. Therefore, in subsequent analyses, they collapsed across the labels within groups. There was a significant main effective group indicating that infants in the legal labels condition showed a greater corrected fixation proportion than infants in the legal labels condition.
How your brain understands phonotactic constraints is by separating acceptable syllable structure, consonant clusters, and vowel sequences. The consonant cluster refers to a group of constraints with no intervening vowels. In English, the groups are consonant clusters and the word splits, such as boot in black, sk in desk, and the sk in 60. 4 is the maximum number of constraints allowed in the cluster. This refers to the optimum theory, which is the form of languages that arise from the optimal satisfaction of conflicting constraints. A syllable is a phonological unit of sonority. Sonority is the relative loudness of a speech pin, such as B has a greater sonority than pin. Vowel sequences are the two vowels next to each other in a word that belong to separate syllables. Each creates its own sound and creates a boundary, so the two syllables can clearly be heard. Bowl, boot, ooh. In the U6 and MATS infant study on phonotactic constraints, they presented 18-month-old babies with two phonotactically legal object labels, or two phonotactic illegal object labels, both paired with novel objects. Infants were then tested using a look while listening measure. This refers to the novel object recognition, NOR, which is a highly validated test for recognition memory. The results showed that infants produce their first words, then they are constantly collecting information about the sound systems of language. When infants are 9 months of age, they are able to discriminate patterns in the sound system combination of their native language from sequences that do not occur. This also showed that 9-month-olds can distinguish between words containing frequency occurring native language sound sequences, words containing infrequent sequences. This reveals that infant studies either sensitive to native language phonotactic patterns.
Okay, I'll be talking about the phonotactic constraints in Italian. And the major feature is that all words have to end in a vowel, and almost every word does. There are a few exceptions, but for the most part, every word ends in a vowel. And because of this, Italian speakers often can't end a word in a consonant, even if they try. So, for example, like the English word outfit, Italians use that a lot. They would pronounce it more like outfita because even though it ends in a consonant, they still can't pronounce it.
Just like in Italian, Spanish has its own set of phonotactic constraints that are different from English. For example, so words in Spanish are not allowed to start with an S plus a consonant. So such as SP, ST, words like that. So an example of this is like a Spanish speaker would say English words such as spray, a study, and a strict instead of spray, study, and strict. Also in Spanish, every vowel is different from English because it only has one sound as opposed to the several sounds that English has. For example, the letter A in English can have the sound A, or A, but in Spanish, the vowels are all A, E, O, and U, and they never change. Just similar to Italian, Spanish words typically end in vowels, but there are some exceptions. There are six consonants that a Spanish word can end in, and these are D, L, N, R, S, Y, and Z. And the sounds they make in Spanish are D, L, N, R, S, I, and Z.
So this slide is about the phonotactic constraints in German. As we can conclude from the table, German is a much more phonetically consistent language than English. So this means that German words almost always sound the way they're spelled, with consistent sounds for any given spelling. So in German, the rare exceptions are usually foreign words like loanwords from English, French, or other languages. So have a look at the following examples of phonotactic constraints in German. Moreover, there are, for example, onsets which can appear in the English language, but not in the German one, and also the other way around. So for example, kn is possible in German, but not in English. Tw is possible in English like the word twice, but you can't use it in German.
When people learn languages, the phonotactic constraints of one's native language can affect how well they can say words in the new language. So, for example, an Italian speaker can learn Spanish fairly easily because, like me and Gio said, they have a lot of the same phonotactic constraints, like a lot of words end in vowels. But an Italian speaker learning Arabic, it would be harder for them because there's a lot of different sounds and overall the words are just built differently. And on the right, you can see a map of all the Romance languages. And I included that there because those languages, the words are built very similarly in them. So speakers of those languages are able to learn the other languages in that group fairly easily because of the same phonotactic constraints.
The way phonotactic constraints and bilingualism kind of interlocks is pretty interesting. When a bilingual person interprets a language, they actually use both languages at the exact same time. And this is known as parallel language activation. And when a bilingual person of two similar languages interpret one language, their interpretation of language is actually faster because the phonotactic constraints are similar in both languages. However, if the languages are pretty different in their phonotactic constraints, these constraints can kind of interfere with each other, which can cause a delay in interpretation and also cause foreign accents.
So this slide refers to the effect of phonotactic constraints on second language speech processing. The questions that we are asking is if phonotactic constraints of the first language affect speech processing by second learners of English. So in our globalized world, communication is a necessary skill, especially with English as it is the world language. To process speech, segmenting words in the stream of speech is necessary. So one of the issues of speech processing is how words are segmented and how the mental dictionary is accessed. But how does it work? Listeners segment words on the basis of the minimal unit of their language. So studies show that phonotactic constraints do not interfere with second language processing by native speakers from a different country. So to conclude, this provides evidence that second language speakers use the segmentation strategy that is used by native speakers of the target language.